Hello, Soundies. Welcome to our Sound for Video session. Today is the 28th of May, 2023. It's good to have you all here. Hope you're doing well. Let's jump on over to our agenda and we'll take a look at what we have going today. First, I want to talk about microphone positions, and we're going to do that with the types of microphones you might use for live streaming, podcasting, voiceover. That's what I'm using right now. Here's a Earthworks Ethos. Kind of a close miking type of situation. Also, I'm going to talk a little bit about boom microphones and positions there. And then also we'll take a look at lavalier microphones and how different positions impact the overall quality of sound. And then after that, we do have a couple of questions that were submitted ahead of time. So just for background, the Sound for Video sessions are actually a companion to the courses, the school that we have over at school.learnlightandsound.com. And these are open to the question and answer sessions like this are open to everybody, of course, but just so that everyone has that context, that's what these are. These are the companion. In essence, I wanted to make courses online, but I was worried that, inevitably there are questions and there needs to be a good way to do that. And rather than having, written questions in the course itself, I decided to do something a little bit more interactive like the live stream. So that's what we've been doing since 2015. All right, so with that, let me just talk about what we have set up here today. So right now, actually, let's go to the behind-the-scenes camera really quickly, and let me just give you a quick rundown. So here's Danny, by the way. Hi. So all of the audio is coming through the DLZ, which is a mixer by Mackie right here. We talked about this last week. And right now, what you're hearing is I have this microphone right here. Oh, you can barely see it. It's kind of, there it is. This is the Earthworks Ethos, and I have it on a low-profile microphone arm that's attached to the back of the desk over in that corner. And this is more of a close mic type of situation. This is the type of thing you typically use for streaming or podcasting or voiceover. I also have another microphone. Now you're hearing a boom microphone. That is specifically this one right here. This is the Sennheiser MKH8050, boomed above. And that sounds substantially different, you can tell. We also have, let me just turn this on right here. We have a wireless transmitter. And as soon as that connects, I think we're good there. Yes, okay. And now here is a lavalier microphone I'm holding up right on my chest where you would typically position a lavalier microphone. And we'll move that around in different positions as well so you can hear how that sounds in different positions. Okay, we're now back to the Earthworks Ethos for now. So let me just, we'll take that and power that down for now, just so we have less RF in the room. And save on batteries. Okay, so let's go back to the agenda here. And why are we even talking about this? Why does microphone position matter? And I think this is a topic a lot of people spend a lot of time, including myself, thinking, oh, if I just had this wonderful microphone that fit my voice perfectly, or I could use in productions and it would work with almost any voice. And there are a lot of great microphones out there. And yes, the microphone matters. I'm not going to tell you it doesn't matter. But what I think a lot of people miss is that microphone position makes a huge, huge difference as well. And it makes a huge difference in the overall sound that you get. And in fact, there are different techniques that people use for addressing different characteristics or different types of voices. Now, one thing that happened, it was in 2020, I did an interview with Bandrew Scott of Podcastage. And what we were talking about in that particular case is, with a given microphone, multiple YouTube reviewers or other audio engineers can review that microphone or have their own opinion on that microphone, and it may be completely different. I may really, really, really like one microphone that other people don't care for as much. So why is that? And there are a lot of things, but I think and that old video is really interesting. I actually went back and watched it a while back. Really interesting, some of the insights that Bandrew had, but it has to do with a lot of things. Also, microphone position makes a big difference in the overall sound that you get, and so I think it's important to consider that. And a lot of people just don't spend a lot of time there, or don't. They may maybe acknowledge that microphone position matters, but don't necessarily try to tune it a whole lot, or don't even realize that microphone position can be a huge factor in how the sound sounds. So with that, let's take a look first at the close miking, and let me give you some different examples here. So right now, again, I'm using this Earthworks Ethos, and just to clarify the entire signal chain, just like last week, so I have an Earthworks Ethos here, and actually all the microphones we're going to use today come into the DLZ, which is my mixer. The mixer output goes into the Canon C200. It's converted to digital and then combined with the video, and then that is sent into the ATEM switcher. The ATEM switcher is sending an output signal via HDMI to a cross converter, a decimator, converts it to SDI. That sends it to the other room over here into a Epiphan Pearl Nano, which is encoding the video and sending it to YouTube. So that's the entire signal chain there, just for full disclosure. And it's an entirely different episode to talk about why we have a signal chain that is seemingly so complex. Anyway, let me just do this. One of the things that came up there actually in that video, going back to the video I did with Bandrew, the interview I did with him, a bunch of people remarked my microphone was in frame, but it was positioned somewhere like about right here. If this is the grill, it was somewhere about right here. It was level with and the perspective is always tricky, so it's always hard to tell exactly where it is if you're just looking at a two-dimensional image or video. But it was positioned so that it wasn't concealing my face, but it was clearly visible within the frame. And I got several comments on the video saying people said things ranging from Curtis has no idea what he's talking about because that microphone is positioned in the absolute wrong place, to questions about, hey, Curtis, why does it look like your microphone is not aimed at your mouth? And indeed, it was not aimed at my mouth. It was aimed just above my mouth. The perspective makes it look even more extreme than it actually is. But the purpose of that is that particular microphone, which I was working on a review of at the time, had a little bit of a boost in the sibilance range, and my voice tends to have a good bit of sibilance. And so the combination of those two created this sort of grating, harsh sound. And so one of the tricks that some voiceover artists use when they're dealing with sibilance is that they actually raise the microphone capsule. If this is the capsule, they raise it so that it's not directly at the mouth, but just above the mouth. And that has the effect of essentially rolling off some of that sibilance energy, some of that 5 kilohertz to maybe 8, 9 kilohertz energy. Can go as low as 4 kilohertz, but it can be really, really harsh when the microphone boosts that and your voice already naturally has some of that. So in that case, moving the microphone made an enormous difference. So it made it so it didn't sound quite so sibilant, and I didn't have to use a de-esser, I didn't have to do any other post-processing, but just positioning the microphone made a difference. So let's give you a couple of samples here. So I don't know if this will sound different here with this particular microphone, but let me do this. I can actually pop this off, and rather than rattle that in your ears, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of, your ears have been hearing this microphone now down below my mouth, pointing up at it at about a 45-degree angle. Let's see what happens when I pop it off and go straight at my mouth. So I'm going to mute for just a moment while I pop it off. Okay, and now here it is directly at my mouth, and you may hear a little bit of a difference there. She sells seashells by the seashore. This pretty bright mic and pretty bright voice. Now I'm going to move it more up into a boom. I don't really have enough cable to completely do this. See if I can pull just a little bit more up here. I can do something close, not entirely, a little bit more cable. Something closer to a boom microphone position up here. So that's a little farther away, but that is possibly changing the overall sound. Just use your ears here for a second. Just listen to that, especially if you're listening on your phone, you're probably not going to be able to hear unless you put some headphones on. Here's directly, again, more directly at my mouth, maybe off just a little bit of an angle, so I'm talking just past it so we don't have any plosive issues. And then here it is from below. And again, distance matters, but also the angle can make a difference as well. So let me pop that back on. Okay, there we go. Back in business. All right, let's pause and take a look at the chat. What have we got going in the chat there?
Plenty.
Plenty, Danny says, going on in the chat. All right. What do we have?
We kind of have a running commentary.
Oh, okay. So Alan is here from Sound Speeds. Alan, welcome. Good to have you here. Alan and I had a nice conversation yesterday. Come on, Curtis, teach me how to point these microphone things. Alan, I think you are an educator in that realm. So Alan is definitely one to listen to when it comes to microphone position. He has a lot of great input. Let's see what others say. Always been interested in how it looks behind the scenes. Well, let's go behind the scenes again. I can do a little tour.
Well, this was when you had it.
Oh, yeah. But let's do a tour here. Okay, here's behind the scenes. So key light. Camera is right over here in a teleprompter. I don't know how well you can see that. Right there. Here's the mixer. It's a Mackie DLZ. The computer is over here. I don't know. You can see just barely the edge of the screen. I think if I do that, you can see, yeah, there's the screen right there. So that's the Mac that is has YouTube Studio on it and also has the encoding. So I mentioned that there's an encoder out in the other room that is encoding the video and sending it to YouTube. I have a tab open with the control surface in essence, the control app for that here. An iPad here, which is what's running our keynote presentation. That's the agenda and everything, all the questions and things like that. Here's the control surface that Danny uses to switch. The actual switcher is back here. You can just barely see the lights back in here, so it's kind of buried. It does have a fan in it, so I prefer to keep it hidden. And speaking of fans, 1 second.
Your 1 second is up.
I just turned off another fan on the camera, which has a fan until you start recording. So we're going to start the recording. We have a headphone amplifier down here. You can just barely maybe see the LEDs there. There's a row of LEDs right here. So this is a Little Labs Monotor. It has 2 outputs, and so it's getting the audio from the switcher, and then that has a headphone feed for Danny and a headphone feed for me, so we can both monitor. Here's the chat computer back here that Danny uses to put the chat messages up on the screen, and we use the switcher to key those out. So it shows when she selects one of your chat items, it shows large on the bottom part of the screen. We feed that into the switcher, and then we key out all of it except for the bottom part. So that
I can do it now.
So like this, here's Diesel who says, always been interested in how it looks behind the scenes. Of course, the teleprompter for me is just so I can see the questions and see what's in the program feed right now, what's going out on the stream. So that's why I use the teleprompter for. And then here's Danny's mic, which is also feeding into the Mackie.
Hi everyone, this is Danny's mic, and I've got to take my headphones off so that I can talk somewhat normally.
Very good. Okay, so that's the tour. This is a boom mic up here we're going to come to in just a minute. Incidentally, this is the new Deity boom pole, carbon fiber boom pole. And next week, if everything works out schedule-wise, Alan from Sound Speeds will be back joining us next stream to talk about and help me evaluate this boom pole. And of course, he's a professional boom operator, so he has lots of insights to share there. All right. Anything else in the chat that we need to cover? We can switch back to the main cam for now.
Well, there's some interesting comments about...
Comments? Let's see.
Well...
Yeah, bring them up. Yuck, a microphone in the frame.
Okay, wait.
I like the look of a mic in frame for talk video podcast. Gives a professional, authoritative look, in my humble opinion. Very good. Okay. My videos have no authority then. Both are valid. Sound Speeds, you're the obvious exception. Yes. There are different ways to do it, and it's fine. I don't care for massive mics that are concealing part of the face. I don't really care for that look, but I don't mind having a microphone, something like this, in the frame. But I think there's definitely value for a boom mic as well. Boom mic, you have to control the acoustical environment a little bit more. Mark says Johnny Carson had his mic in the frame of every show. They sometimes dipped the boom into frame in early productions. I do remember seeing the boom in some of the early productions. So they'd have someone up on a big, I can't remember what they call those. Alan probably remembers the name. Glenn True talks about them. They were basically like these big automated arms that you had controls. You could move them in various directions and point the microphone. And yeah, you can definitely see that in some of the earlier late night TV shows.
Okay, this was before the framing comments.
Before the framing, ASMR warning. Get our hearts racing, Curtis. I don't. ASMR doesn't really do much for me, so I don't really know what that experience is like. Nathan says the ASMR is real. Danny's not a fan, so we're not going to do any more of that. Christopher says, have you switched fully to the DLZ for the live streams now? No more Shelford channel. For the time being, at least, yeah. The nice thing about the DLZ is it's very convenient because it has the sound pads, and I can bring more than one channel into the stream with the DLZ. I've got 4 channels running today, which is what it has. Well, it actually supports more than that, but yeah. I may also at some point start running the Shelford channel into line level into the DLZ, just so I can have the benefits of the Shelford channel and the benefits of the DLZ, including the sound pads. So it's not, Shelford channel's not going anywhere. I promise. Perambulator booms. That's what they're called. Thank you, Alan, for that. All right. I'm live streaming with 3 cameras at once and 3 microphones, none of these visible. Had to compromise a notch with the overhead mic and MV7, but it works. You're using an MV7 as a boom mic or an overhead? That's interesting. I would think you'd have to gain that up really, really high to get much out of it that way, but cool. Okay. Good, it's working. Okay. All right, so that's just a couple of thoughts about close miking. So for voiceover, I mentioned the one situation, and I don't know. That's just one example I thought of where you can move the mic around, and often in studios, like when they're recording music, both for vocals or for instruments, they will spend some time. The engineer will spend some time kind of tuning the position of the microphone to get exactly what they're looking for. And you can do that exact same thing with voice. You just have to make sure that you set aside the time to do it. Now, it's a little bit trickier with your own voice because listening to your own voice, even if you have real-time monitoring, it's hard because you're generating the sound at the same time that you're trying to listen to that same exact sound in your head and your ears. So it's tough to do that. So in those cases, what I would recommend is doing a variety of a test recording, in essence, and kind of describe where you've moved the mic and so that you can recreate exactly which one of those sounds the best. So something to consider when you're close miking for voiceover, stream, and podcast. Okay, let's move on to boom mics that are overhead. So again, in this case, we have the Sennheiser MKH8050 up here, boomed just out of frame. And let's switch on over to that. Okay, now I'm on the Sennheiser MKH8050, and I do have a compressor on. Let's turn that off. It's going to get substantially quieter here. No?
It just sounds less nasal.
Sounds less nasal. Interesting. Here's with the compressor on, and here's with the compressor off. Oh, no. My mistake. Wrong channel. Stand by. Here's with the compressor off, and here's with the compressor turned on. Okay. So here's with the compressor turned off. So just so you get a sense for how that sounds. And again, this is, if you want to go to the overhead cam again, Danny, this is how this one's positioned here. So it is just barely out of frame right here, aimed down at about 45 degrees. And let me just kind of tune the position a little bit. I'm going to try not to make a lot of handling noise, but it is held in a C stand right now. So Here is pointing it more towards my nose. This is more at my nose. Might have more of a nasal sound, I'm not sure. Here's more at the chest, and you can see that changes the sound. So just the angle, didn't even really move the position, but change the angle. This is a microphone with a supercardioid polar pattern, meaning it's fairly narrow on the front. Kind of gets bigger the farther away you go. At least conceptually, that's how I think of it. But even just changing the angle just a little bit can change the overall sound pretty substantially. So again, down at my chest, here's a little bit more at my mouth, and here's a little bit more closer to my nose and nasal area. So you can change the sound even just by the angle a little bit. So now you can also take boom microphones sometimes and use them in more of a scoop position.
We have a request.
Oh, we have a request. Shake it like a paint shaker. Let's hear the effectiveness of the shock mount. Okay. Be prepared on your volume, people. Here we go. I don't know. What's everybody's evaluation based on that? It's pretty good. Did a pretty good job, it sounds like, from here. So thank you, Alan. That was the first test of the new Rode. I think they call it the ASM1, the shock mount, which is kind of a lyre style shock mount here with an XLR connector. So that's what that sounds like. Okay, so boom microphones. Obviously, the closer you are to the boom microphone, if I get farther away, it's going to sound... I'm going to aim it a little better so I can get farther away. So now I'm probably right here about a meter away from the microphone. You can see me, I'm just right down here, about a meter away from the microphone. Obviously, you want to get it closer than that if you can. Here I'm going to position it again. There we go. And this is the microphone now pointed roughly at my mouth. And here it is with a compressor turned on. So the compressor actually makes a substantial difference to the sound as well. Okay, let's pause there. Let's see what we have in the chat. We'll go ahead and switch back to the main camera here. That is the ASM1. So that's I assume ASM stands for, I don't know what A is, audio maybe, shock mount 1, which is the new DD shock mount. Yes, exactly right. MV7 is gained at 69 dB, and with a zoomed framing on my headshot, it's actually very close to my mouth, some 6.7 inches from my mouth. It's pointed at just a little in front of my mouth, grabbing the air. Very nice. Wow, that's a lot of gain. But sounds like it's working. That's cool. Okay, I think Saturday Night Live uses perambulator boom arms, 2 of them in most scenes for good coverage. Interesting. Is that for the skits or for the... Probably for the skits. Yeah, okay, cool. Shotgun mics and sibilants, are there better hacks for that? Foam covers will cut down on some of the sibilants. It'll cut down all of the high frequencies generally at varying levels, but that's one thing you can do. And then using a de-esser, of course, is another thing you can do. The shotgun microphones with their fairly much more directional polar patterns, depending on the shotgun microphone that you use, you don't want to get too far off axis on those because then you get really weird stuff. That's when you start to get the kind of the warbly comb filtering sound if your voice is coming in to the interference tube before. It's funny things happen sometimes, I've noticed, when you get off axis with a shotgun mic, so you don't want to do too much of that. But you can move it just like we did with the with this other microphone here. If you aim it more at the nasal section or more at the chest, you're less likely to pick up quite as much of the sibilants. So that's one thing that you can do.
Oh, they're clarifying, which I think you just...
With position, yeah. So yeah, just where you aim it will make a difference. And if you're booming, I think, Alan, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's why you got your headphones on for a variety of reasons. But one of the things you're doing is tuning the angle at which, how you're aiming the microphone or where you're aiming the microphone. at the actor to kind of get the best sound from their voice. You kind of start to learn somebody's voice. Actually, fairly quickly, you can learn somebody's voice. Like you on first listen, you can be like, ooh, not very much bass, or wow, a lot of sibilance, or maybe a lisp. I don't know. It could be a lot of different things, but then you can adjust how you're positioning the microphone to get the most for their voice, to make the best possible sound for their voice. So a lot of it is practice. So go out there with a boom on a mic on a boom, and position it, and see what you get. All right, we're now switched back over to the Earthworks ethos. So that, just to kind of reset your ears here, that's what we're doing at this point too. Okay. All right, let's see what else we've got in the chat here. Have you used any Sinella suspension mounts? I have not. I believe Alan has. Alan can talk about that a little bit more, but I have not used any Sinella suspension mounts. All mine are Rycote for the most part. I have this Deity. This is brand new here, but most of the rest are Rycote that I've used. The lyre style. To my ear, aiming at your chest sounded best. Very good. That's legitimate. And you bet. Thanks for the question. Happy to answer that. Sound speeds, I use it at my desk too. It's similar to a lyre, but lyre bows are on a single plane while the Deity has two planes joined in the middle. That's how they bypassed the patent. Okay, so specifically, lyre bows are on a single plane while the Deity has two planes joined in the middle. Okay, so it has to do with the construction, it sounds like, largely. That's how they bypassed the patent. Interesting. I noticed that Rode has started making their own lyres as well. Deity, of course, is now making their own instead of using Rycote as well. So, interesting. And SoundSpeed says Sinella is the best. They are the Cadillacs, both in terms of the shock mounts and also the suspension themselves, but also the wind protection seem to be some of the very best. Okay. All right, let's go to the lav mic now, and this is where things get interesting here. Oh wait.
Where do you want me?
There we go. Lavaliers. Now go back to the main camera for now. We made it official. We're moving on to lavaliers. Okay. So what I have here is an sound devices now. When I bought it, it was audio limited A10 transmitter. It's going to my sound devices 888, which is sitting behind me, and that has attached to it the SL2, the slot system. It has two receivers in it, the audio limited, or now sound devices, excuse me. I had the receivers upgraded to the A20, so those are A20 receivers. That's feeding the audio digitally into the 888, and then it's sending line out to the DLZ mixer. So let's switch over to that. And I'm going to start with it kind of in a pretty typical position you often see. Move that off to the side just a bit. Lavalier microphone right down here, kind of center of chest. And let's switch over to that.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're on the lavalier microphone. Trying to level match that a little bit here. Is that about the same loudness as before, roughly? A little quieter? Okay, a little quieter. There we go. So this is what it sounds like in the middle of the chest. Now, if I move it over off to the side, listen to what happens. This is it off to the side, and then moving it back to the center of the chest. She sells seashells by the seashore. She sells seashells by the seashore. This is a DPA 4160 lavalier microphone. Right now off to the side, and now back to the center of the chest. So this is probably going to sound a little chestier here, a little more resonant. And then a lot of people, when people are wearing t-shirts in particular, will position the microphone up here closer to the throat. Very different sound up by the throat. Have you been able to tell a difference there? Yeah, okay. So Danny's hearing that. There are some alternative positions for lavalier microphones as well. If somebody's wearing a hat, you might be able to hide the lavalier microphone up here on the forehead, just under the rim of the hat. or just poking out of the rim of the hat. And the advantage of this, of course, is that when they move their head, the microphone follows them, so you don't have the fall off that you would typically have, especially if you put a microphone on one side. In theater, they'll often have little ear-hung microphones that come out to about on the cheek here. And this is actually pretty, from my point of view, sounds pretty good out here on the cheek, but it is visible, so there's a cost to that. Coming back down to the chest, here's what it sounds like down on the chest. And again, I'm trying to understand what you mean here, Alan. So position the lavalier in the center of your chest and rotate it to the side and the floor. This is an omnidirectional lavalier microphone. In theory, that shouldn't make a difference.
Oh, keep talking with it down.
And this is with it down. Now my hand's in the way though, so I need to move my hand. So now it's facing down, and there's probably plenty of handling noise here. Off to the side, and then in the vertical up position here. That's what it sounds like there. And then likewise, when you come out here, you get outside of this chin shadow, so you're getting a kind of a fuller spectrum of sound, versus when you're up here in the throat, where you're getting something that's a little bit more constricted. Okay, with that, let's go. The detail falls off all right, omnidirectional, and the frequencies are picked up evenly. Okay. Switching back over to the Earthworks. Any other comments or questions out there with the lavalier? Hopefully, that ear position is by far the best sound for lavs.
I think it means the...
Oh, the cheek, having it, yeah, the ear hung. It is definitely a better sound. One other thing I've seen people do is with glasses. Let's go ahead and switch over here. Trying to keep my hand out of the way. It's going to look goofy, but... Okay, now we're back on the lavalier microphone, and it's hidden. You can hide it up here on the arm of the glasses. That's another option that I've seen people do. And that can actually potentially work pretty nicely as well. Okay, back on the Earthworks. So a couple of different examples there. You can see with the lavalier microphone in particular, because it's body worn, there's a pretty substantial difference from those different positions. So where you put the microphone can make a huge difference. And the other challenge with lavaliers, of course, is that while you're choosing what position may sound the best, and actually we haven't finished demonstrating, let me do another thing, and that is putting the microphone underneath clothing, which is often what we do when we're hiding it for narrative pieces. Let me just go ahead and stick this, let me start here. Okay, now it's just on my chest right here. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to put it underneath my shirt. Okay, and now it's underneath my shirt, and it probably sounds a little bit more muffled underneath the shirt. Same position, but underneath the shirt at this point. So that's one thing. Let me move it. Now it's underneath my now it's underneath my jacket, which is a thicker fabric, thicker material off to this side, just so you can hear what that sounds like. And then here is with it not behind the jacket. So there should be quite a substantial difference in terms of high frequencies and how that sounds. So again, there's the lavalier microphone and some of the considerations there. Okay. Whoops, back over to the Earthworks. All right, any thoughts or questions there in the chat? Let's see what we've got going there.
This is from a little while ago.
All right, from a little bit ago, Mark says, does the Deity boom pole run with an internal cable or external? This is an external cable. It does not have a pre-run internal cable. And we'll go into that a little bit more next week. It is carbon fiber, though, nice and light. Renee says, is there any advantage of recording a monologue with two microphones? Well, yeah, we do that in narrative film and video and TV all the time, where we have a lavalier on each person and a boom mic. In most, not all shots, but most shots, in as much as it's possible. And they, in post, will either blend them or just choose one or the other, depending on the If the lavalier microphone may sound better in some cases because they weren't able to boom as close as they needed to. Other cases, the boom may sound more natural and sound better overall. So they may choose that. In some cases, they may blend the two of them to get a fuller sound, but they have to make sure that they're phase aligned if they're going to do that. So yeah, there's definitely advantages to recording two microphones for a monologue. Absolutely, yes. Audio buff. In live audio, I don't have the luxury of miking options with the lapel. I need as much gain before feedback as I can get, and using Omni lapel makes that a bit harder, I think is what you meant there. That makes sense. Yeah, that is tough with Omni lapels. Although there are lots of presentations where they do. Although you'll notice, for example, in TED Talks, they almost always use the ear hung cheek microphones. That just eliminates potential issues with people and microphone technique and messing with their clothing and things like that. So, and it just positions the microphone in pretty much the optimal position for that mic in terms of gain before feedback and signal to noise ratio. Fachiri. Hey, Curtis in chat, would you still recommend the Rycote Nano Shield? I hear there was an issue with handling noise that may have been addressed with a new version. The size is appealing to me. Thank you. I haven't used a newer version. The original version was okay. Again, I don't do a ton of booming, so for me, I'm not necessarily the best person to evaluate those. The one that I bought originally was the Cyclone, the Rycote Cyclone. And honestly, that's a bit much for most cases. It eliminates all. It's interesting because when you're out filming in the wind and you record someone with that, it's like otherworldly because they sound like they're in a studio almost, but but you can clearly see it's windy, so it's a little bit funny. The Nano Shields, I don't know about whether any handling noise has been addressed and what it's like. I don't know if anyone else has input on that. I used the original version and it was okay. I think part of that is that, I don't know that everyone realizes this, but with the lyres, you have to match those based on the weight and the size of your microphone. So if you have a heavier microphone, you're going to need to use slightly stiffer lyres. They really kind of depend on that to get the right balance of suspension. So there's some tuning that has to take place there depending on which microphone you're booming. And I think, at least in some cases, some people, I don't think necessarily tuned the lyres to the particular microphone they were using. Alan says, I know it released the Nano Shield had a click when you wielded it. They adjusted the design months later and corrected it supposedly. I haven't heard the new version. They also changed the covers. So definitely some changes there. And I haven't used the new one either, so not sure. How do you go about gain staging on transmitter receiver without interrupting production actor versus being able to adjust the boom mic gain on a whim? Oh, well, a lot of the new Pro systems are making it so you can set the gain at the receiver or at the mixer. And that's what my setup now does with the A20 Mini at least. It's all gain forward, so I can set the gain at the mixer, so I don't have to interrupt the production or the actor to be able to adjust the transmitter gain. What I have found is I just do a good bit of testing with the people. You always read the script ahead of time, so you know if there's going to be any shouting or laughing or anything where things are going to get a little bit hotter. But I run through a few lines, have the actor run through a few lines just to make sure that I'm at a good spot there. A lot of the pro level systems are clean enough that you can leave plenty of headroom so that it's better to leave more headroom. The A10 transmitters also have a limiter in them. That's saved me a few times with some shouting and yelling. So that's generally how I go about it. Usually, ideally, have them run through a few lines if you don't have any sort of gain forward or remote gain adjustment type of capabilities. Christopher, use a system like Shure or sound devices where gain is set on the receiver instead of the transmitter. Completely agree. I mean, well, easy to say. If you can't afford one of those systems, you do still have to do it the way I just described as well. Mark says, I found the Viviana Beetle for Sanken Cost 11 concealer is working great for concealing the mic under light clothing, like a collar shirt when I do interviews and need to hide the lav mic. Very good. The Viviana Beetle for the Sanken Cost 11. Very good. I think that's a little molded plastic piece. I haven't used that particular one, but that can be very helpful.
This is an interesting comment back when you were demoing the lav position.
Okay, for lav positions. Shame people hate seeing lavs. Well, for narrative film, you can't. You completely blow the suspension of disbelief if there's a microphone in frame. For corporate, anything on stage where you're, doing a live presentation, it's not usually an issue there. Nathan, I begged and begged my pastors to use an ear-hung mic for exactly the purpose Curtis mentioned to avoid microphone technique concerns. The podium mic was a gooseneck STC. So many plosives. Yeah, that's where you want to put some protection on there, some foam probably in most cases as well. So gooseneck STC is small diaphragm condenser microphone for those that are not familiar with that. But yeah, it's tough for people that don't know how to manage mics or don't have microphone technique. They tend to struggle with that. So, and then having a podium microphone, you often, I usually find that some sort of foam on there is going to, even though it's going to cut off some of the high frequencies and definitely color the sound, it's usually worth it because it's going to help manage some of those plosives. So it's a challenge. That's why sound is so interesting. Soundspeeds. Viviana makes my favorite adhesives, and Ursa makes the most acoustically transparent moleskin. So for hiding lavalier microphones is what they're referring to there.
Okay.
Good stuff. I haven't tried the Ursa moleskin. 2 questions. From Daniela. Finally, my Sennheiser 805 works perfect. It's a sound that flash me against an MKH 816T. Wow, that's a classic. I'm just reading through here. Possible such a mic is... Official, this mic is nothing for inside use. It is possible to use such a mic inside means... Is it possible to use such a mic inside means what you suggest for in-room use of MKH 816 or similar in a live stream. So the MKH 816 is a long shotgun microphone, probably not something I'd use indoors. I would use something more like the 8050 here from Sennheiser. I don't know if less expensive options. Audio-Technica makes a 4053B, which is a nice microphone as well for indoor. That's actually a hypercardioid, and that works nicely. There are a million options. It really depends on so many different factors and what you want to use. If you're using a live stream, I like things like this. This is a small diaphragm condenser that the Earthworks Ethos. I think they dropped the price on them, as I recall. I think the price now is substantially lower. So, at least it was for a time. Yes, $399 US. And then they also came out with a new handheld microphone. And it's called, I think, the SR117, which is $200 US. That one sounds pretty good in the tests that I've heard as well so far. I think Bandrew on the Podcastage channel on YouTube has reviewed this one. So worth a listen as well. Correct, but if you do not have a different option, what are your suggestions? For using it, an 816 indoors, make sure your room is acoustically treated and make sure it's aimed perfectly at your mouth so you're not off axis. Control all of the reflections in as much as possible using blankets. That's my suggestion. Darren says, I like the sound of throat lav position. I will have to try that with some of our talking head remote deposition sessions. It depends on the person too, so it's going to depend on the voice, Darren. But in some cases, yeah, if you want a more throaty sound, that is, especially if you're shooting or filming a lot of, we can switch back to the main cam here, especially if you're doing a lot of action movies. throaty is a good sound for that. Jake, do you recommend a step up from the stock mic Sennheiser ME2 that's included with G3 or G4 systems? Absolutely. That's one of my... I want to be respectful here. I really respect Sennheiser as a company and many of the products that they've made over the years. The ME2 is one of my least favorite lavalier microphones out there. It just sounds so not great. There are a lot of different options out there. My favorite, I think a lot of people that have watched the channel here know, I really like the Shure Twinplex lavalier microphones, but to get them on a Sennheiser system, you have to have them custom terminated. So you'd have to work with, either do it yourself or work with one of the pro audio shops like True Audio or Gotham Sound or one of those. Mark, a person can literally go broke buying mics. It's an addiction. I understand, Mark. Bandrew claims he doesn't have a problem. I've slowed down a lot on microphones because I've found several microphones that work great for me and I don't have a need for a lot more microphones. I have good news. At some point, it probably becomes less of an addiction. But that's part of why we have channels like Bandrew's and mine and Sound Speeds, so you can hear lots of different microphones and not hopefully have to make the investment yourself. So, $650 in Europe for the Earthworks Ethos. Okay, so still pretty pricey over there. It's an American microphone made in the United States. But there's still lots of other options out there. You have the Lewitt large diaphragm condenser microphones. Those are quite good. Brighter sounding. I have other microphones, but in this use case, no option against this MKH 805 or MKH 816. I'm not sure if is that a question?
I think she's clarifying her question.
Okay. Yeah, no, like I said, if you can control the acoustical environment, you can get away with those. That's the thing with shotgun microphones, you can use them indoors. Just make sure that you keep them on axis really, really well. So if you're live streaming and you move around a lot, then it could be problematic. So be careful about that. And if you control the acoustical environment, you don't have a lot of reverb, a lot of sound bouncing off of hard objects and coming back to the mic, probably not going to be an option or an issue. So you can make it work. Christopher, could use the microdot version of the Plex microphones instead of reterminating. No, you could. Yeah, that's an option as well. Microdots don't necessarily they don't hold up as well in production use. And what I mean by this, production microphones, lavalier microphones get beat up really quickly. It's been my experience. Actors, they're trying to do their best and be respectful of your equipment, but as they're getting out of wardrobe, I've had those things go flying, and there's, the mic is still attached with the adhesive to their wardrobe, but the transmitter is down swinging and pulling, and they just get a lot of abuse. So the microdot doesn't necessarily it doesn't hold up quite as well necessarily. It also makes a bigger connector, which is a little bit cumbersome, especially if you're trying to conceal it for narrative work. But yeah, then the great thing about microdot is you don't have to keep terminating when you move to different wireless systems. And those microdot adapters are pretty expensive too. So just something to keep in mind. Yeah, I agree. Microdot is suboptimal. It provides it's a trade-off is basically what it is. It gives you some options, but it also has some downsides, just like almost everything. All right. Am I right thinking that without the clown nose, 8050 produces extremely sandpaper-like harsh sh sound at the slightest gust of air hitting the diaphragm? Yeah, you need you definitely need wind protection with that microphone or any others. Absolutely, yes. So yeah, you're going to need at the very least the foam and the slightest of breezes. But really, if you're working outdoors and there's any wind, you're going to need something more than that. Some sort of Zeppelin cover. Okay, let's jump to the questions. We have a couple that were submitted ahead of time, and then we'll come back to the chat, time permitting. Andrew has the first question, and actually I think we already kind of addressed this, but regarding boom mic positioning, I've been using a boom mic in front of the talent angled towards the mouth at a 45-degree angle. I've seen some boom mics angled almost straight down, and I'm wondering if there are any benefits for a steeper angle like this. First of all, Andrew, it's hard to tell with perspective always exactly how the microphone is angled, especially if you're looking at a still photo or a video. So don't always take that for what it looks like in one of those images, but usually there are some, this is where you use your ears and just test it and see what you get, see how it changes the sound. I think that's really important. We did some earlier here just so you could get a sense of that. If you're aiming more towards the chest, you're going to get a little bit more chest resonance. Aiming more for the nose, that's going to sound a little bit more nasally. Potentially that can be good for a particular voice depending on the voice. And then more at the mouth, you're going to get more of the articulation and some of the higher frequencies directly from the mouth. So changing that angle can definitely make a different sound. So experiment a little and see what you get. David has a different question that's unrelated to that first question. And his question is, and by the way, David, charming email. Thank you so much for your email. He had some fun Irish terms in there that made me smile. If I take a pair of stereo matched microphones, 2 mono microphones, and plug one into input 1 of the Zoom and the other into input 2, talking in this case about a Zoom F8N, and where the trim is set correctly and where both microphones have their faders set correctly for recording to tracks 9 and 10, the audio in the headphones appears to be in mono. If I then change the panning on channels 1 and 2 to their far left and far right, respectively, I then hear stereo in the headphones. However, the stereo mix track of channels 9 and 10 is mono when I load the track into the software Audacity on Windows 11. Yes, for a stereo set, you do need to pan them hard left and right. That's just part of making a stereo recording. You can link them in the F8N, and you also want to check it sounds like your headphone routing or routing is set up correctly. I do have a video I can show you if we switch to the Mac here, Danny. If you do a search on YouTube for Curtis Judd Zoom headphone routing or routing, you'll find this video right here, which will walk you through how to set that up on the Zoom F8N. But we did that on the original F8, but it still applies to the F8N. I don't remember on the F8N if when you can link 2 channels into a stereo pair. And I think at that part, in that case, it may pan them left and right. So try that as well. Unfortunately, I don't have the camera set up to actually pull the F8N and show you here, but that's what I would do. Link those 2 channels that you're recording as a stereo pair. That may solve the problem there. If not, yes, pan them hard left and right if you want to get that effect in your headphones. Okay. That's all of the questions that were submitted ahead of time. So we'll go back out to the chat for the last few minutes here, see what we've got in the chat. Daniela, my idea was to use a green screen stand and hang a bed towel to encapsulate the early reflections from all sides. Do you think this works?
And then here was a comment.
Yes, I think that will help. Some of the most reflective surfaces will be your desk and the wall directly behind it. Treating those will help a lot, I think. I completely agree, Nathan. Make a huge difference. So yes, a green screen, I think, Daniela, will help. Anything that you can do that's not going to be super effective. They're usually pretty thin, but anything you can do to manage those reflections will help. Denser blankets will help even more if you can get anything like that.
I think she was talking about bath towel.
Bath towel can help a little bit. Yep, anything soft's going to help some. The denser stuff will help with the lower frequencies as well, which especially if you're working in a small room, that's where you can start to have problems with bassier sound, although it depends on the voices. Spoken word audio, it can sound boxy, but the biggest thing there is to just manage the reflections with the densest material you can. Blankets, usually better. All right, did you get a chance to check out the Deity Theos UHF system yet? No, I have not. I don't think anyone has in the wild. Only Deity themselves have been working with it, but I don't think there are any units out in the world beyond Deity so far. So I don't even know when that's supposed to release. I think they said, if I heard correctly, Andrew in his NAB interviews was basically saying this fall. And then here Nathan says pre-orders start the end of June and the release in September. So probably somewhere in the middle of those two, reviewers will get samples. Honestly, I'd rather wait till September and just get a production copy. I've noticed that some manufacturers will send early copies, and the problem with those is that they haven't necessarily tuned the production yet. So the production runs can end up being a little bit different than the early copies. So I'd rather wait till September, to be honest. Probably be doing that. Fichiri, I think sound gear is way more expensive than camera gear, which is kind of funny to me. Oh, it depends. The funny thing is that photographers and videographers who call themselves filmmakers, a lot of times will easily spend $2,500 on a lens, a single lens in their kit of lenses, whereas you can get a great microphone for $1,000 or anywhere between $1,000 and $2,000, and you don't need more than, really two microphones, like a small diaphragm condenser for a boom, for indoors, and then a shotgun microphone for outdoors. Yeah, you can spend a lot of money. I won't lie. But I don't know that it's necessarily more expensive than cameras, especially because microphones are a better investment. Like you buy a good microphone today. I bought a DPA 4017B in 2017. It's a 6-year-old microphone. If you're talking about a 6-year-old camera body versus a 6-year-old microphone, a 6-year-old microphone is probably a much better investment. It's something that I still use, and it's a fantastic microphone today. A 6-year-old camera body might be losing its relevance and its ability. You can still, the truth is you can still be using it, but depending on what your clients want or need, you may need something newer. It's the wireless systems and having multiple channels that is expensive. That's true. Good point. Yep. By the way, don't necessarily buy everything. Rent the stuff that you need. Maybe having 1 or 2 channels owned and then renting anything you need beyond that is what I would typically do. What I do. I don't usually, that's how I would approach it. Let me just say that. All right. Monitoring yourself in talking live, listening to recording tests. At what level should that be done? If you got a pair of cans and a loudness measuring device, how many dBs would you go for? I don't know that that's how I would approach it. So I would set the recording level so that the meters are peaking around -12 dB full scale, and then I would listen back at a comfortable level in my headphones. That's all I would do.
Oh, somebody got to see the Deity UHF thing.
Nathan got to see them at a trade show. There you go. Did you get to use them at a trade show? I'm curious how they sound. Feature-wise, they look amazing.
Talking about the same thing.
Yeah, I will try it, no doubt. But I don't know that I want to do an early copy. The problem with the early copies, as I mentioned, is that they're not always the same as the production copies that everyone else is buying. So I would rather wait to buy one. And even then, we were talking about the Rycote Nano Shield earlier. Rycote's tweaked that since the initial version. So I got the initial version. It was okay in my tests for the type of work I do, but I'm not hand booming a whole ton. Usually when I'm using a boom, 95% of the time it's up on a C-stand. So in that case, it worked beautifully. I had no issues with it whatsoever. But if you're hand booming, then I guess some people were experiencing some handling noise issues. So, and they've tweaked that after it was released. So just imagine, there's just products evolve over time, and even the same product, the same model is not a perfect copy from one batch to a next. And so you have to be careful about that. And from a review standpoint, I'm almost feeling more and more like I should wait until I know it's not as popular because people are excited about a new product coming out and they want to know about it the day it releases and how good it really is. Well, the problem is that if I get an early production copy that was hand assembled versus everyone else, which is, more automated in the assembly, I don't know. Maybe they're all hand assembled. I don't know. It depends on the product, depends on the company. But I have found that in some cases, when I did my reviews and had a criticism of some sort of con, some of the manufacturers come back to me and say, well, we fixed that in our production copies. And I'm like, well, it wasn't in the copy that I had. So I'd almost rather just get a production copy so that we're kind of more likely to be comparing apples to apples and the same batch to what people are intending to buy. So yes, I'm not going to stop reviewing things, but I don't necessarily want to do it as early as pre-release is sometimes a little dodgy. Nathan says, yes, I got to use them. It was hard to hear clearly, but they sounded better than my Sony system for sure. Oh, good. That's great news. We also did a range test of the Theos, and it was impressive. Excellent. Was it indoors or outdoors that you did the range test, out of curiosity? Fachiri has, one question I have is, how did Deity get past the Zaxcom patent for recording? On the BPTRX, I believe they licensed that technology from Zaxcom. I don't know if the same, while transmitting, yes. I don't know if that's the same for Theos or not. I think they were still working through some of those details. That's why Andrew was a little bit, careful about how they were presenting everything. The hardware's capable of doing that. The question is whether they can make an arrangement with Zaxcom to use that or not, I think is what it comes down to. This is all guessing here. I don't know. I don't have any inside information on this. So that's my guess. All right, Danny gives us the timeout signal here. We're just past the hour. Again, next week, if everything works out schedule-wise, it looks like it's on, but we'll have Alan from SoundSpeeds on to talk about a boom pole from Deity, the new Deity boom pole, and the shock mount, which actually, in our initial test, actually did pretty well. So with that, get out there, make some great sound this week, and we will talk to you again next week. Take care, everybody.